660 The Answer, as well as 1520 WBZW. We started off talking about SpaceX and how this rocket blowing up this morning is now leaving us totally vulnerable to outside foreign sources for our space program, as it were, getting any kind of materials into our astronauts up on the space station, which they share with other people from other countries. But we're also very vulnerable when it comes to terrorist attacks. The government is warning us even more. It started last week, but now the warnings seem to be even more escalated, that we are at a high alert for terrorist attacks inside the United States. Mm-hmm. Inside the United States. That means literally anywhere it is possible. And we've seen this past Friday the type of probably the type, or I should say the nature that these terrorist attacks will take. And that is basically they'll be either orchestrated or semi-orchestrated, probably in multiple locations with 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 people at each location doing as much damage as they can at that location. That's what happened on Friday. There were terrorist attacks across 3 continents. Now, the Islamic State, more commonly known as ISIS, is only claiming responsibility for 1, but they have been putting out a call for all jihadists everywhere, worldwide, to take advantage of the month of Ramadan to attack and inflict terror on the infidels. That would be us. And everybody else who isn't a Muslim, and by the way, Muslims who aren't Muslim enough. They're in this with us too, because they're not Muslim enough. They're likely to get their head whacked off too. And by the way, yeah, they'll do that like they did in France. Whacked the guy's head off, impaled it on the gate in front of a factory that they were going to blow up. It was similar. It kind of reminded me of, do you remember a couple of years ago up this road here in, what was it, Leesburg? Not Leesburg, but it might have been right here in Apopka, where all the propane tanks started going off one night. Do you remember that? It was a gas storage place up there, and they had the propane, and one night they were going off left and right. I mean, boom, boom, boom.
I believe that's a Redneck 4th of July act.
Yeah. Well, it caused quite a commotion. I can't remember if anybody was killed there or not, but that's where these people were trying to, a similar place to what they were trying to attack in France. Put the guy's head on a post with an Islamic State flag, which had some Islamic slogans scribbled on it, and it took a while the authorities, and I'm not sure they even have by now, to admit it was a terrorist attack. But the French officials certainly are certain that it was a terrorist attack. Of course, there were 37 people shot dead in Tunisia by one man. And no, he wasn't supposed to have the gun either, but he had one, didn't he? And then also there was an attack in Kuwait, where 27 people were killed by a suicide bomber. They were in a mosque. So once again, this is the Islamic State's message of peace during the month of Ramadan, where they're supposed to be fasting, but I guess they don't have to fast from violence. That seems to be okay. Only sex, food, drink, and smoke. But blood, that's all right to shed that. But the more course pressing problem for us will be terrorist attacks here at home. The threat is, according to the government, as high as it's been since 9/11, that they do want to inflict that type of attack of damage on us. But nonetheless, we don't seem to be totally too concerned about it. We're a little bit more concerned about gay people getting married and Obamacare and stuff like that, and all that stuff is very important. But when it comes to the end of the day, as an editorialist wrote in this weekend's Wall Street Journal, you can't get married if you're dead, right? Perhaps we've been approaching this problem all wrong. I know we call the show the American Adversaries, and it's because we have an adversarial form of government not necessarily because we're always at each other's throats or something like that. Maybe sometimes we are, maybe sometimes we're not. But we have an adversarial form of government where we can work the ideas out in that forum, if you will.
I've always hated you.
Yes, that's right. But sometimes, being adversarial also means convincing the other side that you're with them. You follow what I'm trying to say here? That by debating with them, we bring each other a little bit closer together. And somehow that hasn't been happening. That the debate has become too vitriolic and too personal. And then, of course, you have situations like where the Supreme Court steps in and takes the debate away altogether. And, of course, all that does is make a lot of people mad on one side of the argument or the other, sometimes on both. But what I'm getting to here is, at the end of the day, we got a bigger problem. And the bigger problem is the threat of the Islamic State and people like the Islamic State. Because I'm here to tell you, they're after all of our throats, whether we're gay or not, whether we're women or not, whether we're young or old. If we are an infidel or if we are not Muslim enough, they are after us, all of us. And the longer we sit back and fail to recognize that and fail to try to work together to thwart that, the harder it's going to be to fight that, and it may at some point, or it will at some point, be too late.
It's you have to, I think about not just how evil and complicit, in my opinion, the media is in covering up what's happening with radical, I won't even say radical Islam, with Islamists. Because if you think about it, what the left has to do with the help of the left-wing media is they have to make sure this problem, if you will, stays hush-hush to the best of their ability. Why? Because unfortunately, as you were describing, there hasn't been honest debate. It's been so vitriolic. It's been absolutely ridiculous to the point where you can't have conversations. You can't admit when people are right or say when people are wrong. And unfortunately, ISIS and the Islamic State falls right into this category, because if the left were to admit and the media were to admit that this is a serious problem, then they thereby have to admit that all of the arguments they had been making, whether you like George W. Bush or not, I don't like many things about George W. Bush. I respected him for his willingness to fight people that wanted to kill Americans. And so what the left has to do and what the media has to do is they have to kind of stay complicit in this. They have to, sure, they're going to report stories like this, and I guarantee you stories like this are going to happen more frequently, particularly this year and the next year, because they've got to get all they can accomplish while you have Obama in the White House, to be quite frank with you. And the media doesn't want to see, whether it's a conservative, whether it's a libertarian, someone more right-leaning in the White House. So they'll continue to suppress these stories. They'll find, they'll throw a speech that instead of a eulogy, a narcissistic speech on TV all day long of the president speaking, rather than addressing issues that really need to be addressed. And I'm not saying, I'm not trying to minimize South Carolina in any way, shape, or form. It's an absolute tragedy. But there's so many big things that are happening that are affecting us nationally. They need to be addressed. Well,
the thing about South Carolina is that they're trying to focus on the wrong thing, and we'll get to that a little bit later on, too. But, Ben, let me ask you this. You're the deputy mayor, I should say, of Longwood. Have you been getting told by anybody that the threat level has been escalated, and is the city of Longwood concerned about it?
I haven't heard anything particular from any of my constituents about that.
I'm talking about from the police or some other governmental authority.
No, we haven't, and we have in Longwood, we have a very good relationship with the Muslim and Islamic community. We have the center right there in Longwood.
Right downtown?
Right in downtown Longwood. I was actually there for their iftar, breaking into their fest. And Longwood police were there, and they actually requested Longwood police to show up to their event to protect them, because they're just as worried as we are about an attack against their community, because they are so open and more progressive in that sense that they're open to Christians and Jews. They invited everybody to their festival.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a lot of faith in our police department in Longwood, the chief, the commanders, our police. They are more than capable of protecting us, and I keep that sentiment.
Well, see, that brings to mind my point, is that if somebody were to want to express hatred against Muslims that are what you described in Longwood, there it is, right downtown Longwood. So, we need to be, every city across the country needs to be aware that these guys are going to want to attack any place that is weak or that shows signs of, let's just say, wrong thinking.
Absolutely, and that's what it's really everybody in the community's job to look out for that. I mean, people don't want to talk about the idea of looking for that person that looks out of place, but you really need to start being aware of the person that shouldn't be there, that's not doing the right thing.
You need to profile, in other words.
I'm not really saying to that level, but you need to be aware of your surroundings.
I would say profile people. Look for people that look out of place, and you profile. It's nonsense. Political correctness has gotten us to the point where we can't even look out for obvious people that look like they may have some criminal intent in mind.
Profiling is the most reliable way to approach this problem.
Good for your health.
That's right. It may not be politically correct, but it's reliable. We'll be right back.